Good afternoon. My name is Benjamin Sanchez. Welcome to another episode of Legal Grounds Live. I defend consumers, tenants, and homeowners when life setbacks bring them to the attention of a court. Today, I want to discuss with you just briefly the issue of the CDC moratorium on evictions. Now, that topic in and of itself is actually quite extensive. And sometimes we get the language wrong because it's not really a moratorium per se. But there's one thing I want to discuss today, which is what brought you here. And that is this. There's one thing that landlords do most in order to circumvent the Center for Disease Control moratorium on evictions throughout the United States. And that is this. What's important to understand about that eviction moratorium is that it basically applies to people who are behind on their rent. There are a number of reasons why a landlord may need to evict a tenant. One of them may be that the tenant is behind on rent. However, that is not the only reason. Other reasons may be other violations of the lease. Additionally, there may be issues where someone is selling a home or selling a piece of property and they need to terminate the lease. And if they do that effectively and legally, and the tenant still does not move out after notice of the termination of the lease, then that tenant is considered a holdover. So in these situations where the landlord is basing the eviction not on the failure to pay rent, the CDC moratorium does not apply. So what does this mean for you? Well, what this means is that if you violate the lease in any other way besides failing to pay rent, then the landlord can proceed with an eviction action. The landlord can give you a notice to vacate. And then after that notice to vacate period is done, the landlord can file a lawsuit against you for eviction. Even though your main reason for that eviction may be the rent, as long as there's something else to violate you on, then the landlord can proceed with that. So with that knowledge, you have to understand this. If you are behind on your rent, you must make sure that you do not violate the lease in any other way. And landlords can get pretty particular. We all know about the Texas Apartment Association form leases that are basically designed entirely in favor of the landlord, and you have no way to change it. They just won't rent to you if you don't sign the lease exactly as they give it to you. And that lease, along with a lot of other leases, gives the landlords a lot of power. If you make too much noise, if you smoke, if you create a disturbance, pretty much any little thing that the landlord can get you on that doesn't involve the payment of rent, they can use that as the basis to file the eviction and then avoid the CDC moratorium. Now, it's important to know that the CDC moratorium is scheduled to end later this month on June 30th, 2021. There is some talk about whether or not that moratorium will be extended again. It's about 50-50 at this point, but I would not bet on it. Although the President Biden and the CDC could decide to go forward on that, even if that's not the case and it does get extended, just know that if you are not paying your rent, you do not want to violate the lease in any other way, or else you will give them, the landlords, an out to get you evicted, although your main violation was just failure to pay rent, because the CDC moratorium on evictions does not apply to those situations where there's a violation based on something other than rent. And in fact, the CDC moratorium specifically references issues where there may be a cause for some sort of emergency, such as violence or disturbances and things like that. So again, the number one way that landlords get around the CDC moratorium eviction on moratorium, sorry, the number one way the landlords get around the CDC moratorium on evictions is to say that the tenants have violated the lease in some other way other than just paying the rent. And oh, by the way, they also failed to pay the rent. And so the number one way that you combat that is that if you cannot pay the rent, make sure you comply with the lease in all other respects. I hope this has been helpful. This has been another edition of Legal Grounds Live. It's just regular videos that I give to try to explain the law in an easier way and not be all legalese and teach attorneys like I often do. This is for you, the consumer, and for those who want to know certain aspects of the law. Again, I hope this has been helpful. This is Monday. Make it a great week. Have a good day. Bye-bye.